Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz Interview Series with veteran San Francisco-based jazz guitarist Ray Obiedo. He opened up about his great 2019 CD called Carousel, his ninth release. It's another collection of original compositions fused with contemporary jazz, Latin, and Brazilian-styled themes. He grew up in the East Bay and very early on recognized his own profoundly soulful musical connection to the Northern California region and its blend of exotic, multi-ethnic rhythms. He has had numerous trips across the Bay to places like the Fillmore Auditorium and Winterland to hear and go backstage to hang with the likes of legends Jimi Hendrix, Led Zeppelin, Janis Joplin, the great Isaac Hayes, and even Sly Stone. He had a world tour back in 1978 to 79 with jazz superstar Herbie Hancock, and that was a huge mark on his early memory. He talks about this and so much more, so please get to know him and dig this interview, my friends.
Okay, Ray, thank you for taking a minute out for Neon Jazz, man. I appreciate it.
Oh, hey, my pleasure.
So I have already played Carousel on the show. I loved it so much, so it's a pleasure to speak with you, and I really want to dive into this. This is your ninth release, and it's just as good as all of your material always is. So talk to me about your vision for this project.
This is an interesting project because a portion or a good majority of these tunes have been kind of laying around, if you will, for a few years. And there are cuts that I hadn't completed. More than 50% easily. And I always loved the tunes, I just didn't complete them. So I decided, let me get in there and, started, I updated everything, added percussion, new solos. But I thought, let me complete it because I really love these tunes. And there's, I think, only two or three new compositions. So it's interesting because I'm looking, I go, wow, this is the way I composed 15 years ago, and it sounds very similar to how I write now, so I guess it doesn't matter. It still sounds fresh. It sounds fresh to most, at least. So I guess my writing skills haven't changed much, which I guess in some ways good.
Yeah.
So, that's what this... album, it's typical of all my CDs where I have two or three different genres. I have a little funk in there, a little fusion. There's always a Brazilian cut or two, and then there's always a Latin, a mambo or a cha-cha. I love all those styles. I love all those genres. So I just throw it all in the bowl, and kind of see what sticks. But
absolutely. Well, and you got Toots on here, you got Bob Mincer, you got a nice lineup going on here, so it just sounds like you had a really good conversation going throughout the whole album.
Oh, yeah. Well, Toots, of course, that was, he recorded actually two tunes a few years ago. One I did release a couple albums ago, and then we just didn't complete this particular cut, and I said, man, I cannot let this thing just sit in the computer for all these years. So I completed the rhythm tracks around Toots. I brought a whole new rhythm section in and just kept whatever Toots had played. And I think it sounds fresh, And the same with Bob Mincer. Bob is a pretty good friend now. I played in his Bob Mincer big band, his R&B big band that he did a couple of years ago. So, whenever I call Bob, he's there. Hey, whatever you need, man, let me know. So it's kind of nice to have someone like a Bob Mincer just eager to jump on the project,
Right on. So you grew up in the East Bay and have always kind of had a connection to music. So talk to me about your childhood and how you really kind of got woven into jazz more or less.
Yeah, I for the most part from around 7th, 8th grade on, starting in 8th grade, I just played drums, and I love drums. to this day. I have 3 drum sets here. I'd rather play drums than guitar, but so played high school bands, R&B bands, and then I decided after seeing Eric Clapton and the Cream, I said, man, it looks more fun to be the guitar player in front of the band as opposed to the drummer in behind the band. So around the 12th grade, I bought a guitar and then started really getting into it, learning all styles. And for 2 or 3 years, I played in mostly like doo-wop groups, backing up R&B type singing groups in Richmond, California, and Berkeley, and the like, Oakland. It just led into other musics, listening to all the different. There's so many. All the bands there are so eclectic in the Bay Area. There was always a funk band. There was 2 or 3 great funk bands. Then the jazz bands and the Latin bands. It's like, man, it's all here. So expanded. I just expanded my the horizon, so to speak, and really got into the Latin jazz thing, and kind of continue all the genre. I love playing funk. I really love the James Brown, some of his earlier CDs with some of those great rhythm tracks that they had. And then, of course, there's all the Latin jazz stuff in the Bay Area. It was just easy to gravitate towards all that stuff and take it all in, embrace it, and hopefully be well versed in all those different styles of music. So, but it's all here. The Bay Area is just has all this great music just to absorb. So that's what I did. Still doing it, actually.
And in those early days at the Fillmore and the Winterland, you got to see Hendrix and Zeppelin and Joplin and Isaac Hayes. That had to leave a deep impression on your music mind.
Oh, yeah. That was really great. I remember I saw Jimi Hendrix 3 times, and 2 of those times we snuck in. Can you imagine sneaking into anything today? It's just
man.
Yeah, we would sneak in to see, and then one of the shows at Winterland, we actually, my best friend at the time, we said, hey, let's go backstage, dude. So we walked backstage and hanging out with Jimi Hendrix at the, just hanging out. I go, what? This is crazy. But we didn't think anything of it then. But can you imagine walking backstage to anything today?
Never.
It's just
never.
Ain't gonna happen.
Uh-huh.
I'm amazed that more people didn't take advantage of just being able to walk backstage and hang out with Led Zeppelin. It's
yeah.
Like, what?
Yeah.
But we were musicians, so we really wanted to get next to other musicians, especially musicians like that. It was crazy to, just I don't know. It was a great time, but things have certainly changed. But boy, that was inspiring to hear Led Zeppelin. I mean, I still think about those 2 or 3 concerts. I was just blown away because it was really like even at Winterland or Fillmore, Led Zeppelin concerts were really concert-like. People were really listening very carefully to that band. There was, no jumping around and acting, like a rock and roll crowd. They were really checking it out,
Yeah.
Yeah, it was great. It was really great. But, that influenced a lot of us musicians in the Bay to be able to see these folks. I used to see the Grateful Dead all the time. They would play in Golden Gate Park for free, just play in some little small stage, And not that I'm a deadhead by no means. I was really impressed with that band. It was very improvisational, as you know. They just, take a theme and play it for many, many minutes. And it was really cool to see that, kind of unstructured, and as opposed to a 3 or 4 minute pop tune. Here's a band that's just jamming, man. That's really cool. Yeah.
Well, the one thing that you've also done, especially in the world of jazz over the years, is you played with, Johnny Hammond Smith and Julian Priester. There's been a lot of names, but the one thing I want to ask you about, because all of these people that you played with have had an effect on you. You've learned something from them, but that world tour with Herbie Hancock had to be huge.
Well, Herbie used a lot of the Bay Area guys here back in the Headhunters days, 73, 74. It seemed like, God, if these other fellows from the Bay can play with Herbie, we all got a chance, Mm-hmm. And it happened, there was an Eddie Henderson, trumpet player. Eddie Henderson had at a recording session. It was around 77, I believe. And I'm able to do the session. I didn't think anything of it. Went to the rehearsal hall. It was Eddie Henderson. It was Hubert Laws. It was Paul. It was just like, what the heck? And in walks Herbie Hancock. And I looked at Paul, the bass player who actually called me. I said, Herbie's on this record? He goes, oh, yeah, I didn't mention him. No, you didn't. Did a session with him, and then after the session, I guess I impressed him enough by him that he asked me if I wanted to do his next tour with him. I think just playing with someone of that caliber, obviously, I mean, when I compose tunes now, I think of how Herbie writes and how he approaches music, and just the fact that, how easy he was to work with, He was very open to suggestions from the rhythm section. He always asked about our ideas, what we should do to a song. This is at recording sessions and at rehearsals. I was very impressed with that, how someone of his caliber could be so open to just us putting our 2 cents in. I try to do that with my band. Just, yeah, sure. It's just, it might be my group, but man, you gotta interject. You gotta hopefully make it sound better than it is. And Herbie it was really fun to play with someone like that. Very, very open-minded to all the different styles of music. And we were actually playing on this particular tour, the Feet Don't Fail Me Now tour, where he was using the vocoder. And a lot of people didn't dig that one, They wanted to hear his old classics, which he did. We played some of the old classics. But when he started breaking out the disco groove and the vocoders, like, oh boy, not a good idea in many of the venues that we played. But I'm glad that he was open to trying something new.
I heard that same sentiment. He came to Kansas City a few years ago, and I heard some people say that. And that's just kind of what happens with these cats. They've been around. They've gone through a lot of musical genres. But the one thing I want to ask you that I find very interesting and refreshing and beautiful about the world of jazz and jazz musicians is I interviewed a 13-year-old from Miami named Brandon Goldberg, and he got to meet Herbie. And I was kind of trying to probe him a little bit about what that was like. And he said that Herbie was so grounded, so humble. It was almost like he didn't want to talk about him. And he wanted to take away from the fact that he was Herbie Hancock. And this 13-year-old was kind of blown away by that. And I guess my question is this, all I've ever gotten from the highest level of jazz artistry from someone like Sonny Rollins, and, he was one of the most human, grounded, just a guy, man. I mean, there was nothing about superstars. So my question is this. How did this happen in the world of jazz where these musicians are so grounded and so full of humility and their ego is always kind of checked out at the door? How did that happen, and how does that feel to be in a fraternity of people that are so grounded like that?
I play in all genres of music. For many years I just played R&B, and I think we're, you say grounded, I think we're, obviously it depends on the individual. But I love being really open about, some people don't like to spread the love or spread the knowledge. And I do feel that with jazz musicians, for the most part, they're always kind of in a teaching mode, you know what I mean? It's like just the general, the kind of music we play. You're playing the melody, and then you move on to a great improvisational section, and then you're kind of teaching at that point. And I think if someone were to ask you questions about your approach, I think you're very open. At least most of the musicians I play with, jazz musicians, if you will. And I'm not a straight ahead player, but I use a lot of jazz elements, harmonically and otherwise. But I think nothing's more fun than at the end of a set when someone wants to know about how you approach a certain tune, what kind of scales to use. I just think, and for sure, Herbie Hancock was definitely open about that. He just was always in kind of a teaching mode, which was very nice, there's been some, jazz musicians I've run into that are just very closed. You know what I mean? Like, come on, man, it's a simple question, dude. That kind of thing. But and in fact, it's interesting. most of the musicians that play in my band or bands teach. They just all teach. And it's just very important for them to continue to teach and to continue to learn. So it's very cool, I think.
Yeah, without a doubt. Let me ask you this. If you have a dream tonight, you run into yourself in your, like, mid-20s, what advice would you give your younger self?
You know what? For me, it would be practice. More practicing. And because I didn't practice very much, and I don't practice now. And the guitar, that is. So that's one, kind of seems like a typical answer. Practice, man, you know. But quite often I'm producing different artists, singers, instrumentalists, and they often want to do cover tunes. They want to do a Duke Ellington tune, a Miles Davis tune, or they want to sing Stevie Wonder, or they want to sing. And I just encourage them big time to compose, to write. You know, if you feel like you're not that good of a writer yet, co-write with someone. Because for the most part, I write all my tunes, all the compositions on my records. The last record I released were some cover tunes. Tito Puente, some Brazilian composers. It was purposely done that way. But I just think it's kind of odd to do a Stevie Wonder cover and then, you know, Stevie Wonder reaps the benefits, you know. I mean, Stevie Wonder has enough money in his publishing company, you know. So I think just build your catalog, constantly write. That's what I do. Even if it's a very simple 2 or 3 chord ditty, I just think it's just very important to write, and even if you co-write, but just to do it, you know. And I did that from early on, you know, as soon as I was really able to play any kind of significant kind of chord, you get a little more take a handle at some more jazz chords. I just wrote. I mean, that was like literally from high school, you know. That was very important.
After all of these years of being a musician and being in the business and everything you've done, what's been the greatest part of it?
Well, I think the biggest joy that I have, even just the last gig I did was a few days ago, was just the friendship, you know. I think for many of us, one of the important things is the friends that we have. I love playing a gig. I like playing gigs, but I actually love the hanging with fellow musicians. I think that's just so important because I thought about it. I have a couple of artist friends who are painters, I should say, and they don't hang out with anyone, you know. They're in their basement or in their art studio, and they paint and draw, and that's kind of their very, very kind of a lonely existence. But when we're creating our art, we're hanging with our friends, you know. And I think that, boy, I just love that part, and I think most musicians do. They just love to play and love to hang and take long breaks and talk. And these are my friends. These are when all my friends are musicians. So it's fun to do gigs and be with your friends, an assortment of friends. It's not always the same band, of course, you know. So I just love that part. I look forward to any upcoming gig, no matter what it is. If it's a big concert, if it's a tour, or even if it's like a casual, like a fundraiser or a wedding or something. I just think it's just so much fun to hang out with your fellow musicians. Yeah, I have a great time doing that. Very fun.
So, answer me this. Why do you love jazz?
I just love the improvisational part of it. I really do, you know. To take something that's just hopefully hasn't been said before. I know that's a difficult one, but just expand on it. And I like you know what I also like, especially in my band or bands, I should say, is the group improvisational part, because we will play some of the same tunes. We've been playing these things for years, but we'll kind of tear the tune apart. And on a given night, we might play it twice as fast as it normally is played. And it's just a group. we tried something once. It was a couple of years ago, and I said, it's very important for everyone to take a solo. And I said, let's try this. Let's play the first 2 or 3 songs, and not solo at all. Just play the melodies, and then we improvise as a group. Do something experimental with the rhythm the drum part, the bass part, but no one blowing on top of it. So now everyone's just on there. They got to really be on their toes, because now we're improvising a group improvisational section for many minutes. It's difficult. It's difficult to come up with new little rhythm section parts without someone in front soloing. So I really like just obviously the improvisation is just ultra important for me, and that's why I love jazz so much. I mean, when I go and see, no matter who it is, I mean, once, okay, play the melody and I'll get to the solos, man. I want to see what you do. Or I want to see what the rhythm section is doing behind the soloist. This is very important. So I think for me, creativity, and it happens all the time when one of my quote-unquote jazz bands or jazz-like bands play. Because I do play, I have a Brazilian-like band and I have a Latin band, and we approach all the music the same way. A lot of group improvisation. It's very important, in addition to the solos that we're backing up. But I really love that part of it. Just what journey will we go on tonight? And on each of these tunes is very important. Yeah.
Everything's going to come down to this, and I want to know this from you. Everyone has a version they have a version or an interpretation of you. Your family, your friends, and your fans, but you know yourself best. Who do you think you are?
Great dad, great husband, and an improving musician that's always improving, hopefully.
Right on.
I try to improve every day. Yeah.
That's all you can do. That's all you can do. And sometimes with this question, brevity is the best way to go about it. That's a great answer. It's a great way to wrap everything up. This has been a very illuminating interview. I appreciate your time. Thank you for Carousel and all the music and the stories. I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you very much, man. Great interview.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players in San Francisco, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Ray for his time, music, and stories. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino on the iTunes Store. Visit neonjazz at youtube.com. And for everything Neon Jazz all the time, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.